My own mother looked the judge in the eye, raised her right hand, and lied about me. The courtroom went silent. Every word she said chipped away at my reputation, my future, my name, and I stood there frozen, wondering how the woman who once held my hand across the street could now be trying to destroy me. But what happened next? No one saw coming. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any accusation. When my mother testified against me under oath, I thought it was the ultimate act of disownment, but hidden behind her trembling voice was a truth no one in that courtroom knew, a secret illness, a silent fear, and a choice I never expected to make between anger and forgiveness. The case was about guardianship of my late father's estate, but it felt like it was really about something much deeper, about loyalty, about trust, about whether I was still my mother's daughter in her eyes. When my father passed, I stepped in to handle the paperwork, the hospital bills, the endless phone calls. I was the one sitting beside him during chemo, the one who learned how to read his medication charts, the one who held the pen when his hands were too weak to sign. I thought I was honoring him, but in court, my mother painted a different picture. She claimed I manipulated him in his final months, that I whispered in his ear when no one was around, that I convinced him to change documents he didn't understand. She said I pressured him, controlled him, isolated him. Each word landed like a stone thrown at glass. None of it was true. I never once asked him for anything. In fact, I told him over and over that whatever he decided, I would respect. The changes he made were his own, carefully considered, discussed with his lawyer, witnessed properly. But when my mother spoke, she didn't sound unsure. She sounded wounded, convicted. Under oath, her words carried weight. The judge listened carefully, hands folded. My relatives, people who had eaten at my table, hugged me at holidays, nodded in quiet judgment. I could feel their eyes on me, measuring me against her version of events. Was I greedy? Was I calculating? Was I capable of that kind of betrayal? I wanted to shout, to list every hospital night, every sacrifice, every moment I put my own life on pause to care for him. But the courtroom isn't a place for emotional speeches. It's a place for restraint, for procedure. So I stood there, still, silent, and breaking. I searched her face for a sign: guilt, hesitation, anything that would tell me she didn't fully believe what she was saying. I looked for the mother who used to brush my hair before school, who used to tell me I was her strong girl. Instead, I saw something else. Fear. Not anger, not hatred. Fear. It was buried beneath her composure, flickering in her eyes when the lawyer pressed her for details. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. For a brief second, her gaze met mine and quickly darted away. That wasn't the look of someone triumphant. It was the look of someone drowning. Still, her testimony nearly cost me everything: my credibility, my inheritance, my standing in the family. If the court believed I had manipulated my father, I could lose not only the estate but my professional reputation as well. Accusations like that stain more than bank accounts, they stain character. But what hurt most wasn't the legal threat, it was the emotional fracture. She wasn't just disputing paperwork, she was rewriting our story, turning my devotion into deception, turning my love into strategy, and in doing so, she made me question whether she had ever truly seen me at all. Losing money is survivable. Losing trust, especially from the last parent you have left, feels like losing home. And that hurt more than the accusations ever could. When my lawyer began the cross-examination, the shift was almost invisible at first. My mother had spoken so firmly moments earlier, her chin lifted, her tone steady as if she had rehearsed every accusation. But under careful questioning, the certainty in her voice began to thin. What had sounded sharp and confident now felt fragile, like glass stretched too tight. "Can you repeat the date you claim this happened?" my lawyer asked gently. She blinked. It was in March," she said. "March of which year?" A pause. Too long. Her eyes flickered toward the ceiling as if the answer might be written there. "Last year." No, wait. The year before. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. She adjusted her posture and cleared her throat, trying to recover. But the details kept slipping through her fingers. She mixed up hospital visits, confused conversation, repeated the same claim twice, word for word, as if stuck on a broken record. Each time my lawyer pressed for specifics, she grew more flustered. At first, I told myself she was just nervous. Courtrooms do that to people. The pressure, the eyes watching, the weight of speaking under oath. Anyone could stumble, but this felt different. Sweat gathered at her temples. Her hands, once still, began trembling against the wooden rail. She gripped the edge of the witness stand, so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breathing grew shallow, uneven. "Mrs. Carter, are you feeling all right?" the judge asked, leaning forward. "I'm fine," she insisted quickly, too quickly. He's twisting my words. But no one was twisting anything. The timeline she had confidently described minutes ago was unraveling. Events overlapped in ways that made no sense. People were present in places they couldn't have been. It wasn't just inconsistency, it was distortion. Then she swayed. Just slightly. Enough to make the bailiff step forward. She grabbed the stand as though the room itself were tilting. For a split second, I forgot the accusations, forgot the humiliation. All I saw was my mother looking suddenly small and unsteady. The judge immediately called for a recess. And that's when something unexpected happened. From the back row, a man I vaguely recognized stood up. Gray suit. Wire-rimmed glasses. Calm but urgent expression. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "I'm Dr. Patel. I believe I need to speak." Every head turned. He approached slowly, as if stepping into something delicate. "Mrs. Carter has been under my care for the past 6 months. She was diagnosed with early-onset neurological disease." The words landed like a dropped gavel. He continued, explaining symptoms in clinical tones that somehow felt colder than the accusations had. Memory distortion, episodes of paranoia. Cognitive decline that could accelerate under stress. Patients often believed events had occurred differently than they truly had. In some cases, they became deeply suspicious of the people closest to them. I felt the air leave my lungs. 6 months of growing tension. Of her accusing me of hiding documents. Of whispering on the phone that I was plotting something. I thought grief had changed her. I thought she had simply stopped trusting me. She didn't want her family to know, the doctor added quietly. She was afraid of being seen as incapable. The courtroom was no longer whispering. It was silent. I looked at my mother. Her confusion was no longer defensive, it was exposed. Vulnerable. She glanced around as though trying to piece together what was happening, as if she had lost control of a story she truly believed. She hadn't told anyone. Not even me. And, in that crushing realization, the anger I had been carrying began to shift into something heavier, not betrayal, but heartbreak. Suddenly the pieces fit together in a way that made my chest feel hollow. Every strange moment from the past year rose to the surface all at once, like answers I had refused to see. The suspicious phone calls where she would hang up the second I asked who she was talking to. The late-night accusations that came out of nowhere, claims that I was hiding documents, stealing money, turning relatives against her. The way her voice would shake, not with anger, but with something far more fragile. Fear. Her growing distrust of me hadn't started as hostility. It had started as confusion. She would ask me the same question 3 times in an hour. She would forget conversations we had just finished. Once, she accused me of moving her purse, only to find it in the refrigerator. I remember laughing gently, telling her we all have forgetful days. I never imagined those moments were warning signs of something much bigger. Standing there in the courtroom, watching her grip the edge of the witness stand as if the room were spinning, I saw it clearly for the first time. She wasn't calculating. She wasn't malicious. She looked lost. When the doctor explained her diagnosis, how the disease could distort memory, create paranoia, blur imagination, and facts, something inside me cracked. The anger I had been carrying for months suddenly felt misplaced. According to her mind, the betrayal was real. The fear was real. The version of me she described under oath was not her invention out of cruelty. It was her illness reshaping her reality. She truly believed I had betrayed her. That realization was more painful than the accusations themselves. Because if she had hated me, I could have fought back. If she had lied deliberately, I could have defended myself with logic and proof. But how do you argue with someone whose brain is quietly rewriting the past? How do you defend yourself against a disease? In that moment, standing across the courtroom from her, I realized something devastating. My mother wasn't trying to destroy me. She was losing herself. The woman who taught me how to read. The woman who packed my school lunches with handwritten notes. The woman who once stayed up all night sewing my graduation dress because we couldn't afford a new one. That woman was still there but fading, piece by fragile piece. The judge ordered a full medical review, his voice softer now, measured with understanding. The tension that had filled the room only minutes earlier began to dissolve. The same relatives who had been shaking their heads at me now avoided my eyes, their certainty replaced with discomfort. The whispers in the courtroom changed tone, from sharp murmurs of judgment to hushed sympathy. People who had looked at me, as if I were a greedy daughter, now looked at her with pity. Some even looked at me with something else, compassion. But I didn't feel victorious. There was no relief in being proven right, only the heavy understanding that I was not fighting my mother anymore. I was fighting time. And time was undefeated. After the courtroom emptied, she sat alone on the long wooden bench near the back wall. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher now, exposing every fragile detail, the slight tremble in her fingers, the way her shoulders curved inward as if she were trying to disappear. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Not the strong woman who raised me, not the sharp voice that had just testified against me, just a tired, confused human being staring at the floor like it might give her answers. For a moment I stayed where I was. Part of me wanted to leave, to let her feel the silence, the same way I had felt it when she spoke those lies, to let her sit with the consequences of what she had done. My chest still ached from the weight of her words. They hadn't just questioned my character. They had questioned my heart. When I finally walked toward her, each step felt heavier than the last. She didn't notice me at first. She was staring at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, even though my father had been gone for years. When I stopped in front of her, she slowly looked up, but only halfway. Her eyes couldn't meet mine. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, her voice thin and fragile. I don't remember things the way I used to." There was no anger in her tone now, no accusation, just fear. And that fear broke something inside me. I could see it. Clearly the confusion behind her eyes. The frustration of knowing something wasn't right in her own mind. The humiliation of realizing she had stood in a courtroom and spoken things that now felt distant, foggy, almost unreal. She wasn't defending herself anymore. She was lost. I could have turned around. I had every right to. Anyone would have understood if I chose distance, if I chose self-protection. After all, forgiveness doesn't erase the damage. It doesn't magically undo public humiliation or years of strained trust. But as I stood there, I remembered a different courtroom in my life. The first day of kindergarten, when I cried and clung to her leg. The time I failed my driving test, and she told me one mistake didn't define me. The night she stayed up when I was sick, pressing a cool cloth against my forehead. The woman in front of me had hurt me, but she had also loved me. An illness had blurred the line between those two truths. So instead of walking away, I sat down beside her, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was heavy but softer. Then I reached for her hand. It was colder than I expected. She hesitated when I touched her, as if she didn't believe she deserved it. Her fingers twitched slightly before curling around mine. That small movement, weak but willing, felt bigger than anything that had happened in court that day. "I know," I said quietly, and I meant it. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about pretending something didn't hurt. It's not about saying the wound never existed. It's about choosing not to let the wound define the relationship forever. In that moment, I chose compassion over pride. Not because it was easy, not because she hadn't hurt me, but because holding on to anger would have meant losing her twice, once to illness and once to resentment. And I wasn't ready to lose my mother like that. Sometimes the people who hurt us are evil. They're scared. They're sick. They're struggling silently. Forgiveness doesn't excuse the damage, but it frees your heart from carrying it forever. That day in court, my mother may have lied under oath, but I learned a truth far greater. Love isn't proven when it's easy. It's proven when it's tested. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is take the hand that once pushed you away.